Welcome to another episode of Moi. I am your host,
Your worst nightmare.
So those of you who have been following me for a little while now will know that this is a channel of positivity. And what better way to channel positivity and evoke feelings of happiness than to talk about the worst moments in my life. There is method to this madness, trust me. There is a point behind talking about the worst things that have ever happened to me. I will get to that, but first, let's crack on, shall we? So the first worst thing that ever happened to me was very long ago. It was back when I was living in England, and my parents made it wasn't really a decision of theirs. We were forced. We were forced to move from England to Wales. Now, I used to live in this quaint little town called Cheltenham. It was very nice. I used to live on this pub on the motorway into the main city, and we had all sorts of characters in there, and I used to love all of the regulars in there. I used to talk to all of them. I specifically remember this guy called Jack, who used to do, magic tricks, like the coin disappearing and taking like some of my toys and making them disappear in front of my eyes. It was amazing. Also remember the name of one of the chefs we had called Oggy. Basically, he sold his Sega Mega Drive, and he gave me a massive black bag filled with video games. I'm talking like 50 Sega Mega Drive games. There was so many. Anyway, this was very long ago. I must have been about, how old are you? Between 6 and 8 years old. And I used to go to this school called Gotherington, and the first 4 letters of the school spelled goth. Not that being goth is a competition, but if it was, I am gother than you. And all of this came to a crashing end, an immediate end. I didn't get to say goodbye. My memory is very hazy, very fuzzy on the exact details, but I do remember we left either very early in the morning or very late at night. It was dark from what I remember, and we piled everything we could into a car, and we drove all the way from England to Wales, where I then lived well into my teens, where I then moved here. I left all of my friends behind. I left all of my favorite people who used to come to the pub behind. It was a very big house. It was part house, part pub, so there was a house and living quarters behind it, and it had like acres of land. I had to say goodbye to all of that too. All of my toys went. It was very, very heartbreaking, and it sucked. We went from this big house in England to living in this very, very, very small apartment above a nightclub in Wales. That's it right here. It was so small. And my sister had just been born as well, so we had a newborn baby with us, and my dad would go out to work and my mother would go out to wherever the hell she went, and she'd leave this screaming newborn baby with us, and we'd be so upset. In fact, it was the first worst time of my life. The second worst time of my life came when I actually went into secondary school, or high school, as you Americans call it. So here in the UK, we have primary school, and then we have secondary school, and then you have higher education. So primary school is anywhere between, I think, the ages of 3 up to the age of 11, and then from the age of 11 until 16, you're then in secondary school. So secondary school is where things really suck. Because in primary school, you have a very small amount of students. There's only about 30 kids your age, because, there's only one class for your age group. But then when you go into secondary school, it's a much larger public school where you have kids of the same age group from a bunch of different schools who all go to this one. So they went from being 30 kids my age to being like over 100 kids my age. And then a bunch of older kids too. And from the very beginning, it sucked. Now, these secondary schools, at least mine, was broken up into what they called 2 bands. There was an X band and there was a Y band. They say that this is completely random, that it's just a way to differentiate the curriculum between the two. So some of them would do German and some of them would do French, and they would do maths and English at different times. It just means that these departments weren't overwhelmed by kids at the same time. I never applied myself in school. I just coasted through because I hated it. And there's a lot of people who are like me out there who, if you're not passionate about something, if you don't care about something, it's hard to do well at something. You just sort of do the minimal amount needed to get through it, and then you just want it to be over. I know there are some people out there who are just like, no matter what you're doing, make sure you do the best you can, but I'm not like that. I know a few other people like that, but if it's not something I'm passionate about, if it's not something I care about, then I'm not going to do anywhere near my full work. So I was always in a strict medium when it came to the classes I was in school. I never overachieved, and I was never so lazy that I was in the bottom classes. Basically, I was worried that I wasn't going to be put into the same band as all of my current friends in my primary school, because I wanted to stick with them, have classes with them, and just go through it with them because I knew them. And a bunch of my friends' older brothers were just like, no, they're going to keep everyone together. They'll keep the primary school friend groups together to make sure it's easier whenever you transition into the secondary school. Sure enough, whenever we went into the assembly room and they gave us the papers or whatever it is, or however it was that they told us that what our bands were going to be, I was put in Y, and every single one of my friends was put into X, which means I never saw them except for break period, which was fine for the the beginning of school. But do you know what happens when kids are around other kids for a very long time? That's right. They create friend groups that I was not part of. So all of my best friends and all the people I got to know through primary school all moved on and had their own brand new friend groups that I was not part of. So I had to make new friends, and I did. Very, very few. It turns out I'm not one of those people who has wide friend groups. Popular, basically. I wasn't very popular. Now, I was never bullied because I've always been strong. My dad actually put a weight bench in my room, and I used to work out. No idea what I was doing or how to eat for it or, what sets or what reps I was doing. I was just doing it. So this sort of gave me a physique in school, and I was sort of known for being strong because I was doing PE class and I could climb the rope and stuff like that. And I must have looked pretty strong because none of the popular boys who bullied my other friends ever came near me. So that's a positive, I guess. But bullying never really was my problem. I don't know how I would have dealt with this had it happened, but I was always ready to throw hands if I was ever in a position where someone was trying to bully me. Anyway, my torment through school came in the shape of social. I was not ever accepted into the friend groups that I wanted. Basically, there was two large groups, okay? So there was three large groups. There was like the popular kids who sucked. And then you had like the massive nerds, like the music geeks, the band nerds, which were fine. I was friends with a lot of them, but I was never really, part of their friend group. And then you had like the goths and the rockers and the punks and the emos who all sort of stuck together. And it was this friend group that I wanted to be part of, but no matter how hard I tried, I would not ever be accepted. They sort of just hung out around the front of the school. So as the years went on, I eventually did get into this friend group, but as a bit of a pariah. So even in a group of goths and rockers and metalheads and emos, I was still the unpopular kid within this group. You had like the leader guy and the popular girl who they were the ones who said where the parties were and what weekends we were going to be going down the beach to get drunk and that sort of stuff. They were the ones. And I don't think either one of them liked me, even though one of them lived next to me. Do you know what? No, she did. I'm not going to say what her name was, but she did. I liked her. I used to go over her house and we used to hang out platonically. Nothing romantic ever happened between me and her. I think I may have had a crush on her, but that went. So the years went on and it was just social torture. I always wanted to be considered more, be valued more, be considered and called upon more, but I only ever seemed to tag along. I was never really invited. I would just sort of hear through the grapevine that things were going to be happening and people were going to be in a certain place, and I would just, show up and they sort of tolerated me. Not that they ever focused on me. I think that was the problem. I was never a point of ignore Jake. It was just, no one really cared whether I was there or not, which I felt I needed. I needed people. I needed to know that people wanted me there, which I think is a natural feeling, right? I wasn't too selfish in thinking that, to the feeling of wanting to be wanted, I never really felt important to anyone, and that really affected me mentally. So school sucked. I could go into more of it. In fact, I've done a video about this already, but school was the second worst thing that ever happened to me. It sucked. The third worst thing that ever happened to me, and I'm saying third because this happened after I went to school, so I think school happened first and then this happened. But the third thing that ever happened to me was my baby sister, the newborn that I was talking about that was, screaming and crying whenever we were moving from England to Wales. She got leukemia, she got cancer. And that was hell on earth. That was a massive strain on the family. I don't know if that was eventually what broke my mother to become a complete but who knows? So my dad was working a full-time job and also trying to get my sister to the hospital, which was very far away. And she went through all sorts of torturous, horrendous therapies and cures and treatments to get rid of the leukemia. Look up what a lumbar puncture is. Lumbar puncture. She had to get those. I'm not sure how often, but I hated hanging out with my family and I hated going to the hospital, so I usually just stayed at home. Seriously, from the age of, I think about 11 or 12, I just hated being around my family. That's when I discovered I don't like family at all. Anyway, there was one summer where I was forced to go and stay in the hospital because she was going through a particularly intense treatment plan where we actually had to stay in the hospital, and that was just the worst time of my life. I had to leave everything behind, all my games, consoles, all my games, and I had to leave all of those behind in order to go stay in a hospital dormitory where my only entertainment was hanging hanging out in the pediatric ICU, where I'd, hang out in the visitors area where kids were playing other video games, which I had to share, which I did not like. I did not like to share my video game experiences. But I did get to know a bunch of kids who were my age who were going through treatment of their own for cancer. Anyway, I got to know Daniel very well. He was my age. Turns out he actually went to my school, and I'd never seen him around because he actually had every cancer that's ever existed. I think I've done a video about this before, so I'll just skip forward. Basically, after the summer in the hospital, summer holidays came to an end. Yes, I spent an entire summer vacation in a hospital, in a pediatric ICU. Never got to see any of my friends or anything like that. It sucked. Other than the pleasant experience of hanging out with the other kids and hanging out with Daniel too. Anyway, summer holidays came to an end, and we all went back to school. And we went into assembly in the first week of this new year, and there was a picture of my friend Daniel on the stage, and it turns out he had died. Spinal cancer had come back, and as they got rid of it, it took him with it. And if there's anything positive to take from this, it's that I actually got to know him before he died. And it was absolutely horrifying and such a revelation to me as a kid, because I hadn't really ever thought about death. No kid really does. Death is like a nebulous concept where it's just something. It's just a thing exists, but you've never really sat down and thought about dying or the end of your life, because there's just so much left of your life. It's not something you ever really have to worry about. But Daniel was just a kid like me. He had the same interests. We both loved the same fighting games. And to hear that someone I knew who was my age had died, it was sort of like a realization, like, oh my God, I'm going to die. Death is a real thing. Bit of a bummer subject, I know, but, consider the subject of the video here. So that was the third worst thing to ever happen. The fourth worst thing that's ever happened to me was after I moved to Northern Ireland. After I'd gotten the job, I got this job working with Vodafone. I was working at the Vodafone retention center and this call center. So we were the ones who were dealt with the task to try and retain these customers from leaving. And that sucked because not everyone called up with a very calm demeanor just saying, hello, yes, I'd like to leave Vodafone because I'm not pleased. No. We used to get complete raging assholes on the phone, and we had to deal with them, and that was a massive drain mentally. I'd done jobs before this, but this was working in a kitchen, working in a bar. I'd never done customer interactive work like this before. Anyway, the huge workload, the amount of calls, the volume of calls that we dealt with, the topic of the calls and people being angry and all of these targets that we were given that we had to hit. So you had to keep your call time down. So you were not allowed to be on the phone with the customer for too long. They wanted you off the phone to take another call. But you also had to make sure that your retention and sales was high, which you can only do if you stay on the phone with the customer for a long time. It was like fishing. You had to really battle with the difficult customers, the ones that really wanted to leave. There was no way that you can increase one statistic without decreasing another. So it was just a constant struggle, and no one hit their bonus because it was set up in such a way. The bonus was great, but they set it up in a way that you were not able to hit your targets and get your bonus. And they made you feel terrible for that. Not to mention they made me work weekends, and some days I was working 6 days a week. Someone always has it worse, but that does not invalidate the hell that I was going through, so please, spare me. I was only 18 years old. This was the first job like this I'd ever had. And I was in a new country. I had moved on my own. I'd flown over on my own. I had none of my belongings. I was just living in my girlfriend's dad's place while I was trying to get enough money to get my own. And after 7 months, I was having really acute mental breakdowns. I'm talking absolutely horrendous. Tearing chunks of my hair out of my head, screaming and punching things and smashing things and just having freakouts at work. And I was just a kid living on my own. I didn't think to go seek mental help, which in Northern Ireland is the worst in the country. By the way, the mental health services are the worst. It's the worst in the UK. So for the sake of my health and the sake of my life, because I think I was literally about to end it, I didn't go back to work. I literally just quit. And so begins the worst debt of my life. The internet bill wasn't being paid, so that went into collections. The phone bills I had weren't being paid. That went into collections. The rent wasn't being paid, and I had no idea about Housing Executive at the time, which was a service that was set up that could pay the rent for people who didn't have jobs, who were redundant. So I had rent arrears. Thankfully, we didn't get kicked out. It actually got dealt with. The rent arrears are all gone, which is great. But this is nearly 10 years ago now, so this is a very long time ago. And the last worst thing that's ever happened to me was losing one of my favorite places, one of my favorite houses that we've ever moved into in this country. This was about 5 or 6 years after the fiasco at Vodafone, where, the rent arrears and the internet arrears, and I had no money and I was just flat broke. After several failed attempts at trying to get a new job and my mental health was just not in the right place, I would literally just have rage fits, just explosive rage fits at work because I could not deal with excessive authority that had absolutely no basis. And by that I mean they would give orders and they would tell me to do these petty things, and when I asked why I would have to do something so petty and so ridiculous, they would say, just because, just do it, or because I said so are trigger words for me. Unless you give me a specific reason for this ridiculous order that you have just given me, I'm not going to do it. I have such a problem with authority. I hate being told what to do. And I ended up having a physical fight with one of the managers at one of the places I was working. Basically, I woke up that morning hating the world, hating my life, and I got into work and I was just punching doors open. So instead of just opening the door and pushing it open, I was punching doors open. And then I went to the locker room to go put my bag away, and I punched the locker and it broke. And one of the managers was in the break room, which you have to go through to get to the lockers. And he comes storming in after me and he's like, hey, what are you doing? You punching doors open. What are you doing? And then I grabbed him and I pushed him really hard against the door. And he just hits the floor. And then he gets up and he goes and he gets the upper management who take me into a meeting where I'm then escorted out of the building like a criminal. Honestly, I was so lucky that no charges were pressed against me. Anyway, a year passed and I got a decent job that I was in a much mentally healthier place at the time, and I was much happier. So I started working for Apple, and I was in a really healthy place, really happy place. And we just moved into a new house that I loved, and it was nice and big, and I had everything we needed. And it was where I started doing the gaming channel, and it was where I started writing the new album, and everything was really great, and we were in a really happy place. When suddenly, out of the blue, the landlady for the house came to the door and with a sheepish little smirk on her face gave us a letter that had 2 sentences on it with no apology on the letter or from her face. In fact, to this day, she's never apologized at all. Basically saying we have 4 weeks to vacate the house because she wants to sell it because her divorce has finally gone through. And she didn't think to tell us that, the fact that she wanted to sell the house as soon as the divorce had been finalized. So yeah, she showed up and I can only imagine she was trying to contain her own excitement and happiness that she was going to be selling this house and finally getting the money for it and just putting it behind it. Not giving a flying about the hell that she was putting me and Kaya through. It was just blindsided out of the blue. She gave us 5 weeks, right? Out of the kindness of her heart. No, wait. She tried to charge us for that extra 5th week. This woman was the most selfish, greedy, arrogant bitch I had ever met in my life. And she didn't apologize ever because I was waiting to hear it and she never did. So we only had 4 weeks to find a place. We did find a place through the estate agent that gave us that house, and I paid the deposit on the new place, and we were super excited to move into it because it was even better. And then just as we were about to move, after about a week, I got a phone call that says, "Oh wait, do you have a cat?" "Oh, you do? Yeah, sorry, we can't give you that house." I'd already put the deposit on it. He knew we had a cat. To this day, we're not entirely sure why the estate agent came out and said that. Maybe because the landlord had seen who we were and was just like, I don't want freaky goths living in my house. But they gave a ridiculous excuse like, oh, the house is just going to be infested with fleas. It happened before. The entire house had to be fumigated. I have never heard of this happening. Ever. And I've had cats all my life. I've never heard of an entire house being infested with fleas. So it was a bogus excuse. So I'm not entirely sure what happened there, but the house that we were excited to move into was then swept away from us. We couldn't have it. And then the 5 weeks were up, and 2 really awful things happened. 1, we did not have enough time to clear everything out, so we left a lot of our stuff behind, a lot of the furniture that we had gathered to finish the place because it was not finished, and we left a lot of belongings and clothing and shoes. There was literally no way we could bring it all. And the reason for that was the second reason it was so awful, because we didn't actually manage to find a place. No one would give us a place. So we ended up moving back into Kaya's dad's house, which was exactly where I started when I was 18 years old. And that utterly defeated me. I thought I was doing so well. In fact, things were doing so well. I was paying rent, I was doing YouTube, and YouTube was going really well for me. You know, I was growing the channel, I was writing music, and I had like this house that I really liked. I had my own studio. Kaya had like plenty of room to do her videos as well, and it was just such a nice place. We had our own furniture, and we just really loved the house. We loved the area. We lived next to our friends. It was great. And it was just ripped away from us. And for a whole year, me and Kaya lived in utter misery. We were in that house, we were back in her dad's house for a year, I think. And then we found this place and we moved in there. So we managed to get through that. So that's also in the past. That was the last worst thing that ever happened to me. So let's talk about exactly why I decided to talk about the worst things that have ever happened to me on a channel that's meant to perpetuate positivity, these are the worst things that have ever happened to me. And at the time, they were so bad. I had mental breakdown after mental breakdown, bloodying my hands by putting my fists through doors and smashing glasses and screaming such unbridled rage that was just so intense. I just wanted to die so I didn't have to feel so angry. I've had anger problems my whole life, and I feel anger on such an intense level, it's unbearable. It's really hard to explain. The only way I can explain it is you're on a roller coaster or some sort of scary ride at a theme park, and it is so scary, it is so intense that you would wish for nothing more than to just get off this ride for it to end. But you can't because you're strapped in and this thing is still going around. You have to wait for it to end. I haven't had them in a long time because I'm much healthier now mentally. The point of the video is to explain to you that these are the hardest things I've ever had to go through, and at the time they are the worst. But I'm still here. I've learned how I deal with things and how my thought process works when these difficult things happen. Every single time I thought this hardship, this really difficult time is going to end me. I'm not going to see the end of this one. This one is going to take me with it. I held in and I worked through it, and here I am. I'm on the other side, and me and Kaya worked through all of these hardships together, and here we are in a really good position. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel, of this awful dark tunnel that just seems to be never ending and pitch black, and you can't see an end to it. Thankfully, I held in and there was an end to it, and here I am on the other side. And I've learned that's pretty much just what life is. It's just a never-ending roller coaster of ups and downs, and you just need to hold on the best you can. Okay, thanks everyone for tuning in. I will see you this Sunday for a live stream. I think I'm going to be playing video games. I think I might play a horror game. What do you think? Silent Hill? I could play some Silent Hill, maybe? Do you think? So I'll see you guys on Sunday, and then I'll see you guys on Monday for another video, okay? All right, I had a great day today because I made it a great day. All right, goodbye everyone.